As the woman lay on her bed, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the setting sun, the parrot perched quietly by her side. The air was thick with the weight of the moment, a quiet sadness settling over the room as the woman's breaths grew shallower, each one more labored than the last. For 26 years, the parrot had been her constant companion, a splash of vibrant color in her otherwise solitary life. She had never married, never had children, and in the absence of human family, this parrot had filled the space in her heart that was reserved for unconditional love. The bird, with its bright feathers and sharp eyes, had been with her through it all the lonely nights, the small joys, the quiet mornings filled with routine. They had shared a life together, a partnership built on the simple but profound act of being there for one another. As the end drew near, the parrot seemed to sense that something was wrong. It had always been attuned to her moods, mimicking her words when she was happy, staying silent when she was sad. Now, it could feel the change in the air. The way the woman's energy was slowly fading away, the bird fluffed its feathers anxiously, its eyes darting back and forth as if searching for something it could do to help. The woman, feeling the weight of her final moments pressing down on her, turned her head slowly to face her beloved companion. Her eyes, though dimmed by age and illness, still held the warmth and love she had always had for the parrot. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingers just barely brushing against the bird's soft feathers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for being with me. For all these years." The parrot tilted its head, its sharp eyes focused intently on her face, as if trying to understand the gravity of her words. It had heard her speak to it thousands of times, but this was different. There was a finality to her voice that even the parrot could not ignore. "I love you," she managed to say, her voice breaking as a tear rolled down her cheek. You were my family." For a moment, the room was filled with silence, the only sound the soft rasp of the woman's breathing. Then, as if responding to the deep emotion in the room, the parrot did something it had never done before. It flapped its wings softly and leaned forward, its beak gently nuzzling her cheek in a tender gesture of affection. And then, in a moment that caught everyone in the room off guard, the parrot spoke. But what it said wasn't just a simple repetition of words it had heard before. No, this time, the bird seemed to understand the significance of the moment, or perhaps it was simply echoing the last conversation it had overheard. Something it had heard so many times when the woman was watching videos on her phone. "I love you," the parrot said, its voice clear and sincere. But then, without missing a beat, it added, "Don't forget to leave a like and drop a comment if you like these stories." The incongruity of the parrot's words hung in the air for a moment, the room suspended in stunned silence. The woman's eyes, which had been heavy with the sorrow of parting, suddenly widened in surprise. A faint smile, touched with the smallest hint of amusement, tugged at the corners of her lips. Even as her body weakened, the absurdity of the moment managed to break through the overwhelming sadness. The nurse in the corner of the room, who had been holding back tears, let out a small, choked laugh, her eyes widening in disbelief. The other attendants exchanged glances, caught between the emotional weight of the situation and the sheer unexpectedness of what they had just heard. The woman's smile grew, and with her last breath, she released a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. It was a moment that was both heart-wrenching and oddly uplifting, a final reminder of the quirks and surprises that life can offer, even at the very end. As the woman's hand fell limp on the bed, the parrot sat silently by her side, its bright eyes blinking slowly, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. It didn't understand the significance of what it had said, or how its words had brought a moment of levity to an otherwise sorrowful goodbye, but perhaps that was fitting. In its own way, the parrot had given the woman one last gift, a moment of unexpected joy, a reminder that even in the face of death, life can still surprise us, still make us laugh. And in that laughter, there is a kind of immortality, a way in which we carry forward the love and the memories of those we have lost. The parrot remained by her side, a silent witness to the end of a life that had been full of quiet love and simple companionship. It would take time for the bird to adjust to the absence of the woman it had known for so long, but in the end, It had done its part, it had said goodbye in the only way it knew how, leaving behind a final memory that would linger long after the woman was gone. As the room settled into a stillness that only follows the passing of a life, the parrot remained perched at the woman's side, unmoving. The soft, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound that punctuated the silence, a reminder that time continued to march forward even in the face of loss. The nurse, after composing herself, gently approached the bed, her heart heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. She looked down at the woman, now at peace, and then at the parrot, who seemed to be in a quiet vigil. The bird's bright eyes, usually so full of life, now reflected something deeper, a sorrow, perhaps, or maybe a sense of confusion. The nurse hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed, before carefully reaching out to stroke the parrot's feathers. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "She loved you so much, you know that?" The parrot blinked slowly, turning its head to look at the nurse. There was no response, no repetition of words this time, just a quiet acknowledgement, as if the bird understood the gravity of what had just occurred. As the nurse began to make arrangements, the parrot remained steadfast, not leaving its spot. The other attendants, moved by the bird's loyalty, gave it space, understanding that this was not just a pet mourning its owner, but a creature grieving a companion it had known for nearly 3 decades. The hours passed, and eventually, the woman's body was gently taken away, leaving the room emptier than it had been. The parrot, though, refused to move, staying perched on the now empty bed, its feathers ruffled slightly as if it was bracing itself against the emptiness that now filled the room. In the days that followed, the parrot's behavior changed. It became quieter, less inclined to speak, as if the loss of the woman had taken away its voice. The bird ate little, only picking at its food, and it spent long hours sitting by the window, staring out at the world it had once shared with its beloved companion. Concerned for the bird's well-being, the nurse who had been present during the woman's final moments decided to take the parrot home with her. She had grown attached to it, and in a way, she felt it was her duty to care for the bird now that it was alone. The transition to a new home was difficult for the parrot. It was no longer in the familiar surroundings of the woman's house, and it spent much of its time in quiet contemplation, as if waiting for something or someone who would never return. The nurse did her best to comfort the bird, speaking to it softly, trying to engage it in the way the woman had, but the parrot remained distant, as if its heart was still with the woman who had passed. Months went by, and the nurse noticed small changes. The parrot began to show signs of life again, albeit slowly. It started to respond when spoken to, its voice a little softer, a little sadder, but still there. It would sit on the nurse's shoulder as she moved about the house, its presence a quiet reminder of the bond it had once shared with the woman. One day, as the nurse was cleaning the living room, she heard a sound that made her pause. The parrot, who had been sitting quietly on its perch, suddenly spoke. "I love you," it said, in a voice that was almost a whisper. The nurse stopped what she was doing and turned to look at the bird. It had been so long since it had spoken those words that hearing them again felt like a revelation. The parrot, now looking at her with those same bright eyes, seemed to be reaching out, trying to connect in the only way it knew how. Tears welled up in the nurse's eyes as she approached the bird. She gently placed her hand on its back, feeling the softness of its feathers beneath her fingers. "I love you too," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. The parrot, sensing the sincerity in her words, nuzzled against her hand, and for the first time in months, it felt a sense of comfort. It wasn't the same as the bond it had shared with the woman, but it was something new, something that could help it heal. From that day on, the parrot began to open up more. It started to explore its new surroundings, perching on different furniture, chirping softly in the mornings, and even mimicking the sounds it heard around the house. The nurse, delighted to see the bird coming back to life, made sure to spend time with it every day, talking to it, sharing her thoughts, and in a way, forming a new bond that was built on mutual respect and care. Though the parrot would never forget the woman it had loved for so long, it slowly began to find a new place in the world. The memories of the past remained, but they were joined by new experiences, new moments of connection that reminded the bird that life, even after loss, could still hold meaning. As the years went by, the parrot became a cherished part of the nurse's family. It brought joy to the household, its presence a reminder of the enduring power of love and the resilience of the heart. And while it would occasionally repeat those words it had once spoken to the woman, "Love you," they no longer carried the same weight of sorrow. Instead, they became a testament to the life it had shared with someone it loved dearly, and a symbol of the new life it had found. In the end, the parrot lived out its days surrounded by people who cared for it, loved it, and understood the depth of its emotions. It never forgot the woman who had been its closest companion, but it also learned to embrace the new chapter of its life, finding comfort in the knowledge that love, once given, never truly fades. It simply changes, grows, and continues on, in ways both big and small. And so, the parrot story became one of resilience, of finding hope after loss, and of the simple, yet profound truth that love, in all its forms, is what makes life worth living.